The app is called Dara. It's an AI-driven mental health wellness app. I came into the project through like necessity. It helped me to find an amazing rock star therapist for me and my lady. We were looking for a couples therapist, and I had been through all of the available tools that are at the top of the Google search, and just got like dismal results, you know? And I mean, it's such an unprofessional experience, and, you know, honestly turned us off from therapy for a bit. And when I had reached out to Tunde, who is the co-founder of the app, to use Dara to find a mental health professional. And I did, and I had such stellar results. I was just a believer, you know? And as he began to just tell me more about the project and the roadmap for it, I really believe in it. And in its essence, it's a mental health wellness platform for underserved communities. And also has this AI component where you're building an empathetic conversation with the AI that was trained by mental health professionals. So that would be intended to be able to handle some of the preliminary aspects of a mental health conversation. You know, therapy is inaccessible for many people. It's very expensive, and good therapists don't take no insurance. You know how that go, like, you spending a check. Like, I talk to kids that in my orbit sometimes, and they'd be like, man, you know, I'm breaking the banks, paying my therapist, you know, $150, $175 a session, and I work a job, you know. And obviously there are pieces of that relationship that only a human being can serve. But there are other parts, like there's a diagnostic element to therapy, and there's like a referential element to the client-therapist relationship, where the therapist is taking note of what you said in this session, taking note. And I believe that that Dara's AI model can help to aid that process and help to make it a little more accessible.
What has your relationship been like with AI and technology?
I've been using AI in music. You know, I've been using AI to recreate samples. Obviously using AI to stem music out, and have started using it in many more ways, and just like learning different models for like music video production. I did a video at the top of this year, actually, where I was announcing my baby son to the world. My son, he's like a year old, but I kept him on a hush-hush for a long time because these people crazy out there. And I had this artistic vision of how I wanted it to be released to the world. And he would be speaking. He'd be rapping my words for him, you know, and it was like, the song was called I Want to Be Ready. So my son, in his verse, he's like telling me, I know you'll be ready because God wouldn't give you a challenge that you couldn't handle. I come from the source of creation. I'm a manifestation, a channel, a reincarnation of ancestors from the plantation to the pyramids. We had to survive in America way before Gil Scott died of heroin. The reason my birth is imperative, through me we were working the narrative. Baby Jesus was really a vessel and Mary was merely a surrogate. Like, and he's rapping this, you know, and he's like 6 months old, you know. I think that was kind of like my first foray into AI, was like figuring that piece out. And I'm lucky enough to have a friend named Nem Perez, who's like one of the most advanced AI video artists. And he's been a director for a long time, and it always was in that tech lane. And so recently he's like been nominated for some of his AI films. But I did through that process learn that like the technician is important, you know, because I went to certain people who were like, oh, well, it can't be done any better than this. You know, I'm just the kind of person that, like, when I hear can't, I kind of am like, okay, I'm going left. Yeah, I would say that process of making that video is what kind of really piqued my interest in AI, primarily in a music space, because I'm just interested by the ways that I can push my concepts and, you know, my scenarios and my environments without spending all the money. You know? That's what I'm up to, you know. And, you know, but in this model, in the mental health space, I think it could be very, very valuable, because obviously we're seeing that the technology is just rapidly advanced and taking on so many human qualities. And to be afraid of it, as many people are, is like a dead end street, you know. And the technology exists. I definitely think it behooves us to figure out how it can better serve us and how we can, you know, advance the work we do. And mental health is just of paramount importance to me. So to be able to combine those worlds is really interesting to me.
What's been your personal journey with mental health, and where do you see the landscape now shifting in 2025?
I mean, my life has been a journey with my mental health. It has in all of ours. And in my situation particularly, I was depressed and suicidal when I was 5 years old, you know. I found notebooks from first grade that were full of like suicidal messaging. And I was like prescribed antidepressants in high school, maybe starting with like Zoloft and Prozac and then Effexor, Wellbutrin, Lexapro, it's a laundry list of things, you know, probably about 10 medications over the span of about 10 years with a very dismal efficacy rate. And ultimately, I ended up leaning more into mindfulness, meditation, plant medicine, psilocybin, ayahuasca, therapy. You know, these are the things that have been incredibly impactful for my mental health. Also speaking about it, you know, being vulnerable, being honest, being forthright, upfront about my mental health has always been a tent pole, a pillar of what I do artistically. It's such an outlet because not only does it allow me to express myself in a way that helps me to alchemize my pain, you know, and turn it into something beautiful, it's also valuable for somebody else because they feel heard, you know, they feel understood. And I do come from a community where mental health is incredibly stigmatized. Being Black in America, you know, honestly, globally. But if we want to start with America, Black Americans are born of trauma. There's so much trauma in the Black American experience, and so few of the people that I know that have experienced the most trauma have access to or receive therapy. You know, of my guys that have been stabbed and shot, they don't have therapists, you know. I got a guy serving 15 years right now in prison because he was in a mental health episode, and his job was willing to let him get therapy, but he would have to miss hours in order to get the therapy, and financially he couldn't afford it. And so he was self-medicating with Xanax, crashed out and shot somebody. It's an everyday thing, you know what I mean? It's an everyday occurrence. So, you know, stories like that motivate me to try to bring a consciousness of mental health care, you know, to my people. Africans will not even dream of talking about mental health. You try to tell African family you're depressed, you need Jesus. Go to Jesus. And you know, a part of this conversation that I feel has not been being had is the psychological impact of the streaming era on the artists who make music. Obviously, we're talking about the economic inequities of one stream being $4,000 split between the label, the artist, the producer, the samples. Nobody's eating off that. But the psychological impact on the mental health of the people that make music, to tell them that their art, their work that they've poured their lives into is worth nothing. I saw this comment on James Blake's announcement of his Vault app, where he's bringing artists to share their unreleased music with fans for a subscription price to them specifically. And a comment said, why would I pay $10 to one artist when I could pay $10 for every artist ever? And at the time I was like, damn, that's the stupidest shit I've ever heard. But then as I sat with it and thought about it more, that's pretty like soul crushing though, you know, to somebody who has given their everything to this art form. And I know if me as somebody who's like experienced success and been blessed to be able to feed my family from music feel that way, like what about somebody who hasn't, you know? And it's like really check to check trying to make this music thing work, you know, and music is completely devalued. So I think artists are in serious need of mental health care. I mean, artists are an inherently troubled group, you know? It's like you open that portal and you feel everything deeply, you know, that the tortured artist trope exists for a real reason. And me and Van Gogh was over there cutting his goddamn ears off, you know what I mean? Just so he could snap on the easel. It was paining him to be that dope. Artists need mental health care, man, you know? I mean, I think the labels should be paying for it, to be honest. Like, I think the labels should be paying for it, and the streaming services. I think that the industry, the fans, the services should converge to help artists receive mental health care, you know, because we need them, you know what I mean?
A lot of your work and what you've been focused on has been the connection with the African diaspora. Can you tell us about that, what it means for the work you're doing, and intentionally how you set your focus?
My father's from Ghana, so he's the only one to ever come to America. So the vast majority of my family on that side lives in Ghana in the Zongo, you know, basically the slum. I didn't lean into it until maybe about 2020. It's not that I was like, that I didn't value my African ancestry, but it wasn't until I really started to build that relationship of my own with the continent and recognize the immense privilege that I have to have a direct connection to my ancestry. At that point, I realized that privilege comes along with opportunity and it comes along with responsibility. You know, most of the people I love most in this world have had the connection to their ancestry stripped from them. They don't know their origins. They don't know the names and the languages and the gods. And these are brilliant forms of control that colonialism has wielded against us, you know? If you can make someone denounce their name and take on your name, denounce their God and adopt your God, denounce their spiritual traditions and adopt yours, then, you know, you can dictate how they live, how they think about themselves. And as I seek to like connect the diaspora and, you know, connect our people and reunite the broken bonds of the transatlantic trade, it's like, in the present moment, how can I counteract those things? But you know what, man? I was in Senegal last week, 2 weeks ago, and I was so inspired by Senegal. Senegal is this very singular place. It's got this West African meets Islamic meets French and North African influence. They have this concept called teranga, which is like an overarching philosophy of generosity. And they're known to just invite strangers into their home. And I was thinking about teranga in like the context of the history of colonialism. The first spot that the Portuguese used to test out their experiment of agricultural slavery was on the coast of Senegal, Gorée Island. And it made me think, you know, maybe this spirit of generosity obviously was exploited as it was with the Native Americans. You have Christopher Columbus saying that, you know, these Native Americans are the best people you'll ever meet. We could take them over with 50 men, you know. But something beautiful is that, you know, all these centuries later, the Senegalese people, they still have their teranga, you know? The Jollof people, the Wolof people, they still live in that spirit of teranga. And I was very inspired by that because it made me think that, you know, perhaps the real pursuit is like to not be turned sour by experiencing so much, you know, struggle and so much evil, like to withhold, you know what I mean? To withhold like our spirit of interdependence, of unity, of collectivism, and like to not be stripped of that, you know what I'm saying? And so that's why I connect us in the way I do. When I built the Black Star Line Festival in Ghana, me and Chance, it was just all about that. It was like, how can we create an artistic experience where all of our people are in lockstep, you know, that didn't even maybe know about each other, but now you got artists from South Africa, from America, from Ghana, from Brazil, like all in one space.
How have the issues you are currently focused on made their way into your music?
Yeah, I mean, all of these ideologies are the basis of the music that I've been making. Just first an EP that's going to be coming in the next couple weeks, and later in the year, the album that I've been crafting for almost 2 years now. And it's largely like exploring those themes of interdependence, and sonically there's a lot of calls to the diaspora. I was just shooting a music video in Senegal, finding the different ways to express, you know, these ideas, you know, musically and visually. Like even this is like, it's like a keffiyeh do-rag made by a Nigerian designer named Adesuwa. She got a company called Legacy World, super dope. Y'all would love her. And what she's doing with that is like what I'm doing with this. It's built on this rich base of reference, you know, like the Dogon and ancient Mali and Mansa Musa and Sundiata and, you know, to Gaddafi and Sankara and Lumumba, like putting the pieces together, you know, and all the things that I read and research and study and express through philanthropic programs and tech ventures, it's all in the music as well, you know? I don't see much delineation between them because it's like I'm just creating.
Tell us about your new song, The Word.
I called it that because I said at the dawn of man's existence, before Muslims and Christians, organized religions and manufactured divisions, in the beginning was the word. How could you quantify with Spotify the value, nigga? Scripture was a verse. And I was just thinking about, the devaluation of music and like how valuable it is though. You know, we come from like a culture of oral history, and the griot was more than a storyteller. Like, this is your historian. This is how the knowledge and the secrets of entire people was kept alive. And I do think that that's what we do with this art form. At its purest, obviously that's not what's happening all the time, you know? That's not even what I do all the time, but like at its purest, that's what this is. This is griot. And as I'm coming into being an independent artist, I'm just looking at the structures differently than I did when I was 20, you know? And just seeing the ways that, you know, the game is structured to exploit. I mean, it's crazy, you know, because when we make these analogies between the music industry and slavery, or the NFL and slavery, people blow up on me in my comments like it's hyperbole, but it's not just conjecture. Like, some of the first Black music was recorded on plantations, like Angola Prison, which was a plantation which is named after an African country. Like, how much more clear can the connection between music, slavery, and exploitation be? And then you get into these contracts and in perpetuity, you know, like forever. Where else do you receive a loan and labor for something, pay it back, and still never attain ownership of, you know, what you've created, other than in these industries, you know, where we play ball? And that's just because that's how the game goes. you know, but I do think we come into a different time when people are waking up. You know, inshallah, artists can unionize. I look at the TV writer strikes and I think, why can't hip hop have a union? You know, why can't we talk about withholding labor until we get a fair shake? You know, there's many barriers to shit like that, but I guess music is like, it's a way of ideating how this could go.